Welcome to the Human Advantage podcast, where culture is created, not claimed. We've been talking about culture for years, but most companies still reduce people to check boxes that are supposed to define an entire human being. We hire for familiarity, we reward sameness, and then wonder why teams struggle. The problem isn't talent, it's the system. And this podcast is about changing that. Diversity beyond checkboxes, culture add over culture fit, and how people think is the real differentiator. Because people aren't categories, they're the advantage.
Hey, everybody, welcome back to another episode of the Human Advantage podcast. We got just myself, Adam Kleckner, hosting today because I got two special guests on the episode today. We are joined by Ryan Darby and Craig Isaak, two leaders helping organizations rethink how work is actually designed. Ryan brings a behavioral science lens to leadership habits and the hidden friction that slows teams down. Craig brings a human-centered and a neuroinclusive lens, focusing on how work can better support the way people think, focus, and perform. So together, we're going to be talking about why so many workplace challenges are treated like people problems, when in reality, they might be system problems, and what leaders can do to create less friction, stronger teams, and build more human workplaces. So welcome, fellas. I'm excited to have you.
Thank you. Excited to be here.
Yeah. Thanks, Adam.
You bet, man. Boy, this is a good one. So we'll jump right into it. As I kind of touched on in the opening monologue there, like both of you guys talk a lot about workplace friction. And so when we say friction, like Craig, what does that word mean to you?
Well, friction in, I think, almost any case, any context, right? If it's in your car, it's probably a bad thing, right? That's why we have engine oil. But friction is not a positive connotation, and it means something's off, right? Something's rubbing together in a way that you don't like. It's not helpful. And in the workplace, we can identify lots of ways. I think if we just think about all of our own work experiences, we can think about frictions that are personal to us, that are systemic, that are in the team, et cetera.
Yep, I love that. And so would you say the modern workplace is not designed for how the human brain actually works, Craig? Ryan, you talk about that friction tax. So Ryan, how do those ideas connect in your world?
Yeah, the idea of the friction tax is that organizations are paying the cost of friction. So, nobody likes to pay taxes. So a clever way of saying it is like, stop paying the friction tax, right?
Right.
And this is what's really funny about this is, unlike the IRS, like, you don't have to pay the friction tax. You're just paying it because you've always paid it before. When you look at the history of work, like, we spent a lot of time, like, there was just a movement around like processes and systems, like Six Sigma, Lean, Kaizen, all these things around systems and processes to eliminate friction, and, productivity improved. Yet we don't even bother taking that same approach to human interactions and human potential. And so when we talk about the friction tax, what we're really saying is, like, your people, I mean, they're everything. People are what separates you from your competitors. And every time you handicap them, you create frustrations where you limit their ability to really, thrive.
Yeah,
That's friction tax, and you're paying it. And it's stupid to pay taxes you don't need to pay.
for sure. Well, and I think like, the term we all hear in the workplace so often is the burnout, right? Everybody talks about burnout. Everybody talks about, but that so often gets associated with, oh, they're overworked, or, oh, it's too many hours in a day, or, oh, it's this, not necessarily like how much of that friction is what's causing the burnout. And I think more than anything, it's less about the work. It's more about the friction. Because like when people are passionate about what they're doing, they love what they're doing, they'll work 12 hours a day and be happy about it. But when there's friction involved, that's where I think the real burnout comes into play, and I don't think enough people look at that.
Yeah, I think another word for friction is, you could say the word frustration, and that feels more human, right? Like frustration. And how many of us would continually return to a relationship in which we constantly feel frustrated, right? Another word for frustrated, by the way, is anger. Same emotional process. We just use frustrated because it's nicer. But if you were constantly frustrated in your marriage, like, how long are you going to stay married, right?
Yeah.
Like, at work, we have these relationships with our work. And it's what leads to the burnout. What leaves people to leave and quit is because we get frustrated to such a point that we're just like, I'm going to go somewhere else where I don't feel frustrated, where there isn't
100%.
this friction.
Yeah, and there's tremendous cost associated with that. People don't realize it, right? So Craig, talk to me then about like where do most companies misdiagnose a people problem that's actually a system problem. Because I think when we hear this friction tax, when we hear burnout, when we hear all of these things or turnover because of that, to me, my brain goes to, and I think a lot of people's goes to, oh, well, that's the person problem. That's the person's problem, right? That's an individual's problem. When in reality, I think it's a systems problem. So I'd love, Craig, for you to touch on that distinction a little bit.
Mm, okay. For me, a lot of it comes down to communication. I think every organization lands on a sort of a default lexicon nomenclature, the language they use in certain circumstances or all circumstances, and also the questions they use. When you're allowed to ask those questions, what can the question be like? How is it phrased, etc. And so people come into a new organization as a new hire, and a lot of them quickly learn, hey, this is what's rewarded, and this
Yeah.
is what's not rewarded or punished.
Yeah.
And that is a system, right? You're creating a system of communication and you're identifying communication breakdowns based on that system. Now, that's all very true. Then the layer that we like to put on it as well, that's very personal to me, is then how do I communicate? How do I receive information? How do I process it? And how do I give it back? Right? Some people are processing more quickly. Some people are more reflective, and so we create a system around communication, but then we also have to consider the individual, and there's natural friction there, and the blame often goes to the wrong place.
Yeah, communication's so important too, right? Because we often reward the loud or fast talkers, right? Not the people who need to take time to
Yeah.
process it, come back with the solution. I think in a dialogue, often it's whoever speaks first gets the quote unquote reward, when in
Mhm.
reality, lots of times the person who speaks last is the one with the best idea. You know?
Absolutely.
As a loud and fast talker, I don't mind the system. Like, let's
Yeah,
go.
right. Me too. Yeah, I
It
mean, my
works.
wife tells me I talk too much, but she's probably right. I do, but yeah,
Yeah.
yeah, I hear you.
Yeah.
I hear
I
you.
I think that's a really good example of a system problem, right? That we're not giving space for the quieter, the more reflective thinker, that we're really rewarding extroversion in
Yeah.
meetings as being like, oh man, that person's so smart. They spoke first, they spoke last. Oh my gosh, they're brilliant, right? Instead of
Yep.
waiting for really smart people that might have something to say at the end after they reflected. Um, but your question about systems is so good. We call it conditions, right? There are
Yeah.
conditions within the workplace that are either set up to help you succeed or set up to help you fail.
Totally.
An analogy of this is with schools. Like for years, schools were looking at high school students and like, why are people dropping out so much? Why do our students not want to come to school? And what they realized is large part of the problem is because of busing. High school students were always first. They were coming at school at like 6:30 a.m. But for high school, for teenagers, their natural like sleep wake time, the circadian rhythm is shifted so that they naturally wake up later. And so
Oh,
many
interesting.
forward thinking school districts actually shifted them to be your later start times, starting at 8:30, 9:30. And you know what happened? Attendance increased, engagement increased, grades good, standardized test scores. So the
Yeah.
conditions adjusted slightly to bring out amazing results. It wasn't a people problem. The people were just fine. The conditions were all wrong.
Yeah. And I think, I
Mhm.
mean, that's such a great example, but there's so many with schooling, right? I mean, I think back to my own
Mhm.
experience with being diagnosed with ADHD at 13, and like it was a geometry teacher who pulled me aside and was like, listen, man, like I think something's going on. He's like, yeah, like I understand, like you understand concepts and theories, but he was basically said, like, I have no idea how you get to the answer. He's like, it's very clear your brain doesn't follow linear progressions, but he's like, you're going to struggle inside of this current school system because teachers want to see linear progression of thought, and you don't show your work in a linear progression. Your brain, formulates things in a different way, and that was super eye-opening to like, well, I'm gonna have to adapt to this system. even though it's not how my brain functions, right? And I think we look at that carries so much into the workforce too, where we reward fast talkers, reward people who kind of follow that traditional workplace system. But the innovators, the people who come in with the best ideas, Silicon Valley was born out of neurodivergence and different ways of thinking. The people who really push the boundaries oftentimes aren't the ones who fall the line in that system. So I think
Mhm.
it follows from school all the way to the workforce. But I want to go back a little bit to how we can help managers here and how we can help stakeholders, because I think if someone's disengaged, if someone's burnt out, underperforming, what should leaders look at before assuming that this is a person, that the person is the issue, or it's a person issue versus a systems issue?
Your
Let's go
story.
Ryan and Craig. I
Yeah.
want to hear both your inputs on this.
Yeah,
So
yeah, your story was like it was just a really good example of a school setting, but a great manager, right? Like
right,
what we
exactly.
teach our clients is that our managers need to almost take a radical individualistic approach to their employees. So I need to look at, as a manager, I need to look at each of my employees and think, what are the conditions that are going to set them up for success? Who are they fundamentally? How are they strong? Where do they
Yeah,
struggle? What do they need in terms of an environment, in terms of like relationships, all these other things that go into the workplace? And if I can set the right conditions, just like your geometry teacher did, said, hey, this doesn't work with, maybe we try this, then I can bring out the best in people. I'll have a confession. I've done well in a lot of workplaces, done some really cool stuff. I've
yeah,
also completely flopped at least 2 jobs.
yeah,
And the difference between those two had everything to do with the manager who said, Ryan, like I need a lot of autonomy. I need a lot of freedom. That's who I am. You can,
yeah,
um, I do not work at a pace that other people work at. I tend to be somebody who's a sprint and then I slow and then the sprint
yeah,
and then I slow. That's just how I do. Um, and so managers that allowed me that freedom of time, autonomy, allowed me to like kind of have flexible days where I worked here and didn't work there. I did really, really well. But the managers that made me sit at a desk and required the 9 to 5, um, I absolutely flopped in those places. I mean, I really flopped. I could tell you stories about how bad it was. Was I a different person? No, the conditions were set up differently and the managerial expectations were completely different. There was
yeah.
a lack of individualization versus extreme individualization.
Totally. Totally. I'm not laughing at your response, Ryan, but I am
Yeah.
laughing from a personal. I flopped in one role, the shortest role I ever had. I stayed there for like 6 months, right? And I
Mm.
remember that we had a snow day, and usually it was an in office role. You were there 9 to 5:30. If you left at 5, it was frowned upon, right? So you're there 9 to 5:30, and we were able to work from home that day. And I remember the CEO saying, "Send me what you're doing every 30 minutes. It's a good exercise on thought." And I go, "This isn't an exercise on thought. This is a micromanagement of having to know what we're doing every 30 minutes." And I quickly just go, there's no way my brain can function in this environment. Like it's
Mhm.
not possible." So it lasted 6 months and I was like, "Cool, I'm out." Like this is it. But it was totally like I flopped in that role, quote unquote, because I was like, there's no way I can work in this environment. Like that's not how my brain functions, right?
It sounds absolutely horrible to me, to you, but you know what? There are people who are like, yeah, I could totally do that. That
For
sounds
sure.
awesome.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Totally.
And
Totally.
and by the way, they write all the books on productivity. Just to let you know, like
Exactly.
all the books on
Exactly.
productivity are written by people
Exactly.
who enjoy that type of system. Um,
Yeah.
yeah,
Yeah, definitely.
yeah,
Craig, what do you think leaders should be looking at? Like, how can they I guess,
Yeah.
real quick, Craig, I wanna interject fast. Sorry about that, but this is how my brain works. What are signals that leaders can look for, right? Like if you're coaching a leader and they have somebody who's disengaged, burnt out, underperforming, like what are the signals that they can keep an eye out for?
Well, I'm going to start talking because this is how my brain works, and I'm going to
Do it.
figure out what I think as I
I
say it.
love it. I love it.
The signals might come around, right? That
Mhm.
train of thought might come around because I don't have an answer right off. What I wanted to really interject is the question why. Okay, so
Mm.
this employee, we need to assume credibility. That employee was hired for a reason. They had skills,
Yep.
expertise, experience that somebody, whether it was this manager or another, said, yes, this person can help us. They can move us
Yeah.
forward. Okay. So with that as a foundational underpinning, then the question of why aren't they delivering on those things? is the absolute right first question, because we have to
Yep.
assume they have it in them. So what is it that's getting in the way? What's the friction, right? What are the
Yeah.
conditions that are negative that are getting in the way? For me, that 30-minute check-in, absolutely getting in the way. Not for
Yeah.
everybody. That's why the question why is so important, because for some people that works. For many people, it doesn't. It's also, I think we've got some biological things to talk about and a
For sure.
30-minute check-in and right.
Yeah.
But
Yeah.
but the signals really are, if we assume credibility to start with and something's not measuring up, start with why.
Yeah.
Uncover that why.
I think you did answer the question though, right? Because I think I always say, and it's a little cliche and corny, but I do think the two best characteristics of a leader are curiosity and empathy, right? And I think
Hmm.
starting with that why is part of that curiosity piece of going, what's going on with this person, right? Like, what, like, is
Hmm.
it something outside of work? Is it something inside of work? How can I be better, right? And really
Hmm.
exploring and asking those questions of what is going on here. To me, leading with that curiosity is exactly what you're saying, and to me, that can help you dissect whether that's the people or leadership problem, right?
Hmm.
So I think you did answer it great.
And I think you could add on to that and this I love this idea that we assume that people are credible, right? We hire
Right,
them for a reason. They're here because they're skilled. And so if I'm a good manager and somebody's failing, I got to take responsibility.
for
I
sure.
really do. And I don't mean I have to like do their work for them, but I have to look at this by being very curious as to what I need to change to help that person to respond, because something about the conditions are creating friction that is stopping that really qualified person from succeeding. And
Yeah,
so my
or I mean,
responsibility as a good manager, own it.
you could second get that. You gotta second guess the whole system, right? Was the hiring
Yeah.
system broken? Was the hiring process broken? Did we hire off of keywords instead of cognitive approach? Did we hire off
Yeah.
of skills instead of strengths? Did we look
Yep.
at environment fit when we hired? Because I think so often people hire off of quote unquote skills, right? I use that as a buzzword because in reality, I think when we break down skills in the workforce, oftentimes we're just talking about tools. If we look at
Mhm.
engineering, it's do you know Python? Do you know Java? Do you know Adobe? I'm like, that's a tool. That's not a skill. How you utilize that tool to solve business outcomes is the skill, but also is it in the right environment? Are you able to utilize your strengths to utilize those tools? That's the skill. So I
Yeah.
think not only is it, hey, this person was talented, but did we put them in the right environment? Did we actually test the skill or did we test the domain knowledge? Did we test everything? So I think really looking at systematic failures of why somebody's failing more than just saying, oh, it's that person lied on their resume. Well, no, that person didn't lie on their resume. That person, if you look, was, at a Fortune 500 company for the last 25 years. And now, they had structure, they had red tape, they had, answers to everything. And you just threw them in a startup with 10 people that's all ambiguous and you're wondering why
Hmm.
they're failing. That's not how their brain functions.
Hmm.
Hmm.
Great
So
Yeah.
example.
anyway,
Love that.
side tangent there.
Yeah.
But yeah.
Well,
So
it's not though. Like it is this idea
yeah,
that as a manager, like you gotta you gotta get curious. Like, okay, what is
yeah,
happening here for this star performer not to succeed, right?
yeah,
So,
yeah.
yeah.
So Ryan, you touch on it. I'm obviously looking at your profile and some of the work you put out. You touch on kind of this the fog, the heat, the grind.
Mhm.
People who are going to go check you out after this, like break that down into plain language for them.
Yeah. So when we talk about friction, we try to make the most obvious sources of friction pretty clear to people. And
Yeah,
so this kind of cute analogies that we use, like fog. One of the most consistent points of frustration, again, friction, frustration, is lack of clarity. And in
yep,
fact, if there's anything that a manager can do right now to improve performance of their teams, to get really clear on the things that matter most and let go of all
right,
the things that don't, right? Checking in 30 minutes, that's stupid, right? Making sure that you made, the sale that you're supposed to make absolutely clear, right? So
yep,
get really clear on what matters most. Anytime that's foggy, you're going to get friction, right?
yep,
And then we move on to the heat, right? The heat has to do with the emotions that we carry into work, especially related to our relationships. If
Yeah,
you are in a workplace in which you're experiencing a lot of interpersonal conflict, that's friction that will not allow you to achieve. I happen to know one person, this person may be on this podcast, who told me that when they experienced conflict with their boss, like it set them back 3 days.
for
Person may or
sure.
may not be here, but that's a great example
Yeah,
of heat really disrupting people's ability to succeed. And the
for
last
sure.
one that we talk about is grind. And you think of gears grinding, right? And that's
Yeah,
basically this mismatch. Like, what are your strengths and what is a job asking you to do? Do those things align or don't they? And if they don't align, then I I don't care how I don't care how many tools you know. If your fundamental strengths don't align with the job that you're trying to perform, then it's going to be really hard for you to be successful. And so
for
getting rid
sure.
of that and aligning strengths with your actual performance is how you create flow. So clarity, emotional security, relationships, and then making sure your job aligns with strengths, that will eliminate the vast majority of frictions that people
Yeah.
experience.
I love them, and it's funny to me because listening to you talk through that in to me this conversation, it seems so common sense, right? Like you hear that and you're like,
Hmm.
well, no shit, like that's easy, but
Yep.
in reality, like that's not the culture that was created, and that's not like how the workplace functions. It's how 95% of workplaces don't function that way. So Craig, like we've talked about this podcast a bunch, we've talked outside this podcast a bunch. We intentionally put the kind of tagline in this podcast where culture is created, not claimed, right? Because I
Yep.
think so many
Yep.
companies claim they have this brilliant culture, claim they have, the best culture ever, or claim they're inclusive, or claim they're diverse. Then you look at the systems behind it, they do nothing but separate people. They do nothing but exclude people. You talk to 10 employees, 9 of them tell you they're miserable there, right? So, how does friction shape culture on that day to day?
Friction creates what I call the corporate costume. It's
Mm,
specific to each organization. Sometimes it's clothing.
yep,
Oftentimes it starts with clothing because it's visible. But it creates a costume again that rewards or punishes certain behaviors, communication, um, always on availability, right?
yep,
Um, Visibility as a proxy for performance,
yep,
speed as a proxy for clarity. These are common ones, right? Not necessarily in every organization, depending on their actual work. And so the friction, it's happening, right? Whether you
yeah,
know it or not in the background, and you grow and you adapt to it.
yep,
And then in order to fit in, then you fit in and you've adapted to that dominant culture, whether you can say it, and describe it in very clear words or not, it's there.
yeah,
And so that friction, right, that you're feeling, hey, I don't communicate like that, but I'm going to communicate like that to fit in, right? That's personal friction, right?
yeah,
So they people adapt to the corporate costume. They feel that friction, and that costume again is a culture that just happens. It's unexamined, it's unintentional, but it's most definitely there.
yeah. It's funny, man. You kind of brushed over this, but the time of work, right? And you guys remember during COVID the mouse wiggler saga wherever companies were finding people at the mouse wigglers and firing them. It's funny because the corporate response to that was immediately fire everybody. They're not working. Anybody who had a mouse wiggler is not working and is unproductive. And like to me, I'm like, did you ever look at the system behind that? Like, I am not creative if I'm sitting at my desk in the room that I'm at right now. This is not my creative space. My creative space is when I take a break midday and I go out in the garden and I do a little yard work,
Mhm.
or I get some fresh air. Like that's when my ideas come, but I would show away from work, right? But if I needed to take a 20-minute break to solve a problem or think of an idea or think of a solution, I'm much better off going for a quick walk, going outside, going to get some fresh air. That's where I can clear my brain and actually get like there's no way I'm having a creative idea where I'm at right now. Like my office is
Yep.
not that's my operational kind of war room, like get my tasks done. If I need to be creative, I get out of here. But the immediate solution was they're not on midday, fire them. they they have a mouse wiggler. I'm like, but if you would have been at the office and you saw that person, I'm gonna go for a walk and think about this real quick. Oh yeah, sure, no problem. Go do it,
Hmm.
right? And so I
Hmm.
think we make up these stories on what productivity actually is. Um, anyway, so another side tangent with my brain, but that you kind of brushed over that piece, but I do think it's a really important one to talk about of what systems force out people because their brain doesn't naturally fit what they perceive as production,
Yep.
Yeah, that's a really cool example of how we customize a job for ourselves or craft our job. And
right?
what's really interesting is you look at organizations at the top of the hierarchy, they do that a lot. Your C-suites, they craft that job around the way that they work, right?
100%.
And they produce really well. And then they
Yep,
look down this often they will look down and be like, "Hey, work this way. I don't work that way best, but you need to be at your desk. I'm going to take walks in garden. You need to do this." And it's really like I'm going to be honest, it's stupid. Like
it
if you're
is.
a person with a different way of working, you got to assume everybody within your organization is an actual person with like
Yep,
unique ways of thinking and feeling and behaving. And then why don't we give them the same opportunity to job craft? I'm not saying all
totally.
jobs are like that, but I think a lot more than we give credit for.
I think you're spot on. You're spot on. It touching on kind of that different way of thinking, different way of working, because I think it's becoming so much more known now. Like we're not robots, and when AI does take over, if it does, I think the most important traits are going to be unique ways of thinking and creativity and ways of solving problems that the computers aren't algorithmically trained for, right? And so,
Hmm.
Craig, you've written about, how 20% of the workforce may be neurodivergent. Be honest with you, the data I think is much higher than that now. We've seen recent studies of, Gen Z and millennials, 53% associate with some form of neurodivergence. I think this kind of outcast and different ways of thinking is becoming more and more the norm. Um, but how, I guess, what are companies missing there when it comes to understanding neurodivergence, neurodiversity, and different ways of thinking?
Hmm. Well, one, forcing people to work in a specific way in a specific environment, whether that's the open concept office from this hour to this hour of the day with
Yeah.
X amount of time at a desk, where we can, if we wanted to track, see your productivity via your mouse as a proxy, is nonsense, because I'm multiply neurodivergent, right?
Yeah.
My energy fluctuates quite a bit. And what prompts me to, to need, biological stimulation, get up and walk, right? That
Yep.
varies. It's not steady day by day. And so I don't fit naturally into a routine. But here's the thing, where the rubber meets the road. I mean, that's the day-to-day stuff, just like for me getting tasks done. I've been in sales most of my career for moving sales forward. Some of that is
Yeah.
knuckle down and just do it. That's fine. I found a way to do that. But I constantly had ideas about how to build a better strategy, how to customize an offer for a client, how to build better value in as window dressing without necessarily costing the company more. But the client looks at that and says, "That's amazing. I want that. That's going to
Yeah.
close the deal." Constantly had these ideas. The issue is oftentimes my ideas were on the wild side.
Yep.
Okay. They probably weren't fully implementable, right? You couldn't do all of it. But what I needed was a conversational partner that says, "Interesting idea, Craig. Let's continue with that and drill down and find the nugget in there that is gold."
Yep.
Okay. Bit of a wild idea. Hope you had fun thinking of that. It was fun for me, right? I like to do that.
Yep.
But
Agree.
then have them say, "You know what? That's probably not possible. And I can give you 10 reasons why." And I'm like, "Shoot, I didn't know those reasons. Thanks for the conversation. But here's the nugget that we can take. It changes a process or
Exactly.
whatever it changes, it can be anywhere." I needed that partner, that recognition that when Craig goes off on an ideation tangent,
Yep.
be patient, talk with him about it, and find something, because what he really wants, what I always wanted, was more sales. Move the company
Yeah.
forward. That was the foundation of my ideation. Let's find the part that's within that that is doable. And
Yeah,
that's neurodivergence in a nutshell, right, Adam? Like, that's the
totally.
innovation, that's the genius. Sometimes you have to refine it and sand the edges a little bit.
Oh, 100%. But I also think it's giving you the freedom to explore those wild ideas. Because if
Yeah.
we constrain people and saying, "Hey, just focus on operations or focus on this," we would have zero innovation in the workforce, right? The innovation
Mhm.
comes from those wild ideas and then going, this might be crazy enough to work. How could we execute on this? Right. And so I
Yep.
think it is
Yep.
giving that freedom to think differently and push ideas. And maybe you throw 100 wild ideas out there and 99 of them are shit, but that one that's stuck could be $1 billion idea. Right. And so I think we
Yep.
have to let those things go a little bit. Ryan, what would change if leaders stopped asking, how do we get people to fit into the system? And started asking, where's this system creating friction? Because I think what Craig and I were just hitting on there is so many companies try to get people who think differently, process differently, look at things differently to
Yep.
fit into their mold. And I love your take on the creating friction. So I think that dichotomy fits really well of how do we get them to fit into the system and flipping that script to going, where's that system creating the friction?
Yeah, it's in one word, it's unlocking human potential.
Yeah.
Right now, we have systems and processes, as I said earlier, like we have systems and processes where we have unlocked the potential of a process. We're
Yeah.
efficient, we are productive to the extent of the system. And that's it.
Right.
That's as far as
Right.
it gets. And you can, by the way, you can replicate systems super easy. Like your competitors can do it tomorrow, right?
Yeah.
But what we
Yeah.
have yet to do and what sits there just like wasted is human potential. Right now, we have
100%.
humans operating within a system and they're capped. And as soon as we kind of we fold back the parts that don't need to be there. I'm not saying get rid of systems completely. Systems are wonderful. What I am saying is they can be scaffolding that allow humans to truly reach potential. And
Yes.
that's what this does. It allows
Yeah.
humans to reach potential.
I love that, man. I mean, obviously, we called the podcast the Human Advantage Podcast, so we could we couldn't agree more. But
Yeah.
like, part of that was born out of this thing that I think about often, and it's a silly thought, but it crosses my mind probably once a week, man. Is how many people are stuck in a job because they can do the job, but it doesn't utilize what they're really good at. And
Mhm.
I would love to collect that data one day because I think it's probably 80 to 90% of our workforce is in a role because they can do it, but it doesn't fully utilize their strengths. And I think that is such a missed opportunity.
One of the data points that I can't get out of my mind is when we look at engagement, employee engagement.
Yes.
And
Yes.
over and over again, we've been taught like employee engagement is the number. And if you engage people, they'll become successful.
Yep.
What's wild though is the data that says the reverse is as true or maybe even more true. As people become
Totally.
successful, they become passionate and engaged in their jobs. And so when I
Totally.
look at our engagement metrics, they've been flat for so many years. The engagement's not improving. We're throwing money and money after this. It's not improving at all.
Yep.
Maybe in some organizations, but it flops back to level. And I wonder how much this is like to success. That how many people go to work feeling truly successful at work and taking pride in work? Because
Yep.
once they do, I guarantee they're going to start really enjoying their job. But just like you said,
100%.
they're just doing it because, all right, it's fine. Doesn't unlock my talents. I'm not successful at
Yeah.
this, but it's fine. I'm doing okay.
I mean, you want those wins, right? Like we own a
Mhm.
staffing firm, and being in this field, and my career, Craig, like yours, right, has been a lot of sales, a lot of business development. You hear 100 no's for every one yes, if not 1,000 no's for every one yes. But the reason you do it is for those yeses, and the reason you grind all the time is because when you do get that win, it feels so much more powerful, and it keeps you on the hook, and it keeps you engaged. And I think we don't get enough employees with those wins. I think that's spot
Yeah.
on, Ryan. Excuse me. All right, let's do a little lightning round. So we do this at the end of every podcast. I always preface this with saying that I'm the last person that should be doing this because I don't keep anything to one word or one sentence. But
Yeah.
let's keep one word or one sentence. We'll go each one. I want each one of you guys to answer this, but we'll start Craig first. One meeting habit that creates friction.
No agendas.
Oh, that's a great one. Okay, Ryan, what about you? One meeting habit that creates friction.
Yeah. Reporting, not conversing.
Oh, interesting. Okay. Well, I like that one.
Why report? Why not just have an email? I don't need you to tell me in person. Send it over.
Yeah, for sure. If we
You're
wanna
not
talk about
listening
it,
when
we
I'm
can meet,
reporting.
but yeah,
Yeah.
100%. Okay, Ryan, let's start with you this one then. One leadership skill that is underrated.
Individualism, the
Okay,
ability to truly see the individual that you're leading.
okay. And Craig, what about you? One leadership skill that's underrated.
That's my word. Ryan stole it, but he and I agree because we talk about it an awful lot. But
Yep, I
I'm going
love
to
it.
add a little more. I'm not going to keep it to one word or one sentence.
Yeah,
If you stop and think about an athletic coach of a team, the team sports, right?
yes.
They know their athletes, they know what they can do, they know the context under which they'll be successful and how to interact, how to have their team interact.
Yep,
The skill of individualization and the Clifton strength of individualization. If you push people in the know in a corner and say, what's the one, strength that might make an amazing manager, you get them to confess it's individualization because
yep.
they're looking at individual employees and saying, how do I make you successful?
Yeah. Well, not only that, I think they know their potential, right? And I think sometimes we forget about that because
Yep.
especially in a market like this in hiring, job descriptions want to see every single skill checked off, every single thing. They
Mhm.
want the perfect candidate coming in, not realizing even if that candidate's perfect on paper, they don't understand their environment, right? And so, what's their
Mhm.
potential inside of this environment is a
Mm,
question that I don't think we ask enough.
mm.
So, spot on there. All right, we'll end with this one. One word that describes a truly human centered workplace. Let's go, Craig.
Ooh, I am on the spot on this one. Consideration.
Love it. Love it. Ron, I wanted to give him the chance to steal your word there, so it was only fair.
he, he almost did. I thought he was going to do it. Mine is really close. Empathy.
Yeah. Yeah, I love that. I love that. All right, our closing question here that we ask everybody. You guys kinda know what we do, so you understand how we think. We're firm believers that, you can't condense people down to a piece of paper. You can't fit who they are on a resume. So what is one thing that is essential to who you are and how you show up in the workforce that would never show up on your resume? We'll start with Ryan.
Yeah. I won't work like other people. I
Yeah.
really won't. I will work odd hours. I will sprint and you will see me put in long days followed by a day of nothing. But I
Yep.
will achieve clear goals. And I always achieve clear goals, but it won't look like other people.
Yeah. It's funny how much that scares people, isn't it? Scares leaders,
Mhm.
scares men because they want so much control. But you allow people to do work like that, and they'd be amazed at the productivity increase. Totally, totally with you there. All right, Craig, what's one thing that's essential to who you are and how you show up in the workforce, but would never show up on your resume?
Yeah, I had a former leader label me with this, and I know it fits because it is how I operate. I just had never really thought about it and put a label on it, but I was called the anti-sales salesperson.
Love
And that
that.
simply means, right? I don't want to sell you something if it means you're not in love with it, that it doesn't solve your problem, that it doesn't do everything it's supposed to do, but not just on paper, like actually make a difference for you,
Yep.
right? And I always come across, my business development initiatives with who are you? There's the individualization and connectedness and positivity. Because
Yep.
let's just have a conversation. And if I can't solve it, great. But if what I think might solve your problem isn't it, and there's something else, let's talk about that too. And that's the relationship. And so
No, I
I've
love that.
just always been the salesperson, but been
I've always
kind of good
been
at
that
it.
way too. I've always been that way too because my take on it, right? Because we all get these, right? You get 1,000 LinkedIn messages a week on trying to sell you something. I'm like, uh, how are you selling me a solution when you don't know my problem? Right? It's like,
Yeah.
well, a car salesman trying to sell you a new car. Well, you don't even know what I drive yet. My car may be brand new, perfectly in shape, and you're trying to sell me like. you don't know the root of somebody's like, how do you sell to somebody if you don't know who they are or what their issues are? I've always believed that too, Craig, and I'm still blown
Yeah.
away that in today's day and age in sales, people are still trying the solution-driven tactic instead of understanding who their customer is. So, spot
Yep.
on there.
Adam,
Yeah,
that exact same thing for leadership. How in the world are we
100%.
leading people without knowing who they are? Why are we giving them the same tactic we applied to every other person without knowing
Spot on.
who the heck they are, what their skills are, talents are, conditions are, energies are,
Or we're just
neurodiversities?
moving
Yeah.
people into leadership because they were the best I see, and that's the next evolution on the career
Yeah.
trajectory, and we're going, "Hey, good luck. Here's a team. Figure it out." And we're going, "Wait, if I was hands on keyboard yesterday and now I'm in charge of
Yeah.
20 people, like, okay, right?" Yeah, so many things we could talk about, guys. Obviously, us geeks in this workplace space could go on this for hours, but I love this conversation because I think there's a lot of really simple aha moments in this conversation that
Yeah.
people could take away and just go, it's not that hard. And I think that's the point of a lot of this podcast is people
Hmm.
walking away, whether it's neurodiversity, whether it's diversity, whether it's leadership, whether it's workplace culture, of taking little nuggets away of going, it's not that hard to change these systems, right? We don't have to overhaul the entire company. We don't have to break everything down, tear it all down to build it back up. Like little changes can make a huge impact. And I think you guys touched on that a lot today. So really appreciate you joining us. And I'm sure we'll do another one of these because again, this conversation is real hard to fit into a half hour.
Super fun. Thank you, Adam.
Yeah,
Yeah. Thanks so much, Adam.
you bet. Appreciate it, guys. All right, till next one.